Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here from Zoobox, and today, for our daily movie, we're going to be talking about the 1967 film Le Samourai, or the Samurai if you're not sophisticated. Okay, this is a French film from 1967. If you couldn't tell, it's directed by Jean-Pierre Melville, written by Jean-Pierre Melville and Georges Pellegrin. It stars Alain Delon, Francois Perrier, Nathalie Delon, Catherine Jordan, Andre Thorant, and others. The plot synopsis is: after professional hitman Jeff Costello is seen by witnesses, his efforts to provide himself an alibi drive him further into a corner. So this has been on my radar for a little while. It's part of the Criterion collection. I've been watching, trying to go back and fill in a lot of older gaps and any kind of older movies that kind of catch my fancy, trying to find out what else is out there, As like a film fan, or somebody that's wants to kind of really dive into film, for my own personal edification in terms of like education and film history and whatnot, and also because I want to see how people did it, how people do it from all different eras. It's been really interesting. I've been going back watching silent films, and there's just a lot of things that are revealed. There's a lot of hidden gems out there, and they're only hidden to me gems, things that are just aren't on the average person's radar. So what I like to do sometimes is watch a movie that is a little bit off the beaten path and talk about it, just so there's more awareness of it out there in the world. I'm not saying this will probably get 15 to 20 views in a month, but hopefully somebody will find it beneficial. It was a cool movie. I saw the plot synopsis on HBO Max. That's where I watched it. And I was like, oh, that looks really cool. And I saw like the little screenshot. It had kind of a cool aesthetic to it. I knew who Jean-Pierre Melville was because he did a movie called Army of Shadows, like a few years before this, I think. I think that's the one, because that's the one I knew him from. Oh, no, he actually did Army of Shadows right after this. Which is about underground resistance fighters in Nazi-occupied France. It's a really great movie, a really great kind of World War II era movie, and so it kind of piqued my curiosity. He is an aestheticist, and he's really good at what he does, and this movie was awesome. The Samurai, Le Samurai is a great movie. It's a really cool, weird kind of crime drama mystery. It's got a little bit of a noir aspect to it. It's got a beautiful design to it. The whole thing is very mannered, very authored. It's very idiosyncratic. It has this kind of monochrome color palette, every once in a while punctuated by kind of like a bright color when they're trying to draw your eye to something. And it almost takes place in almost kind of like this weird, I would almost consider it kind of like a crime fantasy world. Everything feels so pared down and so bare and so and there's so many layers of bureaucracy and like these weird, like if you had done this more kind of out there, the more eccentric version of this probably would look like almost like something like Brazil. Looks like a really pared down version of Brazil. I mean, granted, it doesn't go as crazy, but it does have those kind of aspects, those same kind of like observations about just like any type of life when it comes to the police, when it comes to these hitmen that are part of some sort of weird syndicate that they don't really get into. It's all just kind of there for flavor, to give you a little texture to things, and it never delves deeper than it needs to. And it's called The Samurai because it's making a parallel between kind of these hitman, or this hitman specifically, and he's got a code. Okay, he has a way of doing things. He has a way of living his life, of taking these contracts on, and nothing gets in the way of that. Nothing compromises that for this guy. He is not, he doesn't take any half measures, any shortcuts, any bullshit. And the movie is kind of like this kind of a little bit of a thriller, a little bit of kind of like a cat and mouse game between this detective who can't prove that he did it, but he just kind of like has this kind of detective's intuition or whatever you want to call it, and he kind of just goes at this dude with wild abandon. Like he's just fervent. In fact, I would say that the first half of the movie, the first like 45 minutes to an hour almost, is all about he goes and does this crime within the first 15 minutes, which is a beautiful 15 minutes. It's almost wordless. It's just a gorgeous movie to look at. And just the visual design of the movie and the way they put it together. And actually, there's not a lot of dialogue in the movie, period. But because it's kind of from the POV of the samurai, it's very stoic. Anyways, but it goes through that, and it does like he kills the person he's going to kill. Somebody like sees him. There's a witness, and it kind of unravels his plan. And then the rest of it's that first hour almost is the detective, him in the police station, trying to not get fingered as the murderer, as the killer. And they do all these kind of weird like ways of trying to get people to identify him. And the detective's a little shady in the sense where he's trying to lead people to kind of this conclusion. And there's a lot of really fun stuff in there that was really inventive and surprising. It's not realistic. Like I said, it's almost like a fantasy. There's a surreal nature to the movie. It does not feel... It's literally happening, but it's happening in like this very... like in a world that is in a vacuum. It doesn't adhere to the rules of logic and rationale of like the real world. And if this was a real killer, like he wouldn't get away with this shit like this. It's very mannered. It's very movie-like. It's very story-like, storybook almost. But it is a cool fucking movie. And that was my biggest takeaway from it. Like, that's one of the reasons, the thing that it just like stuck with me of just like how cool it was. Even just on the most basic, superficial level. It doesn't really have a lot of going into it with like subtext and whatnot, other than just this kind of idea of honor and stoicism and kind of being a slave to your code. And I think that's something when you go look back, if you watch, if you're familiar with Akira Kurosawa movies and whenever he does his samurai stuff, part of the thing about samurais is, they're very honorable. They have this code. Nothing gets in the way of it. They're stoic. But it's also part of the tragedy of their life. They're like priests. They're soothsayers. They've given everything. They've taken an oath and they've given everything to this way of life, this way of being. And he's that's the parallel they draw with Mr. Costello, with Jeff Costello. That's what the parallel they draw, because he becomes a slave to it. It ends up ultimately in this being kind of an undoing of sorts. But it's a great scene. The movie is just full of great scenes, great performances. The guy who plays the lead, Jeff Costello, is fantastic. Steely-eyed, angular face, just like very French. The movie is French, if you can't tell. But he's like so perfectly cast, and he's juxtaposed with like these other actors. I don't know if they did it on purpose or if it's just what happened by happenstance or whatever, but he's so like angular and stoic, and everybody else is kind of got almost like soft features, round, like of the people that he's like kind of facing up against that are trying to catch him. And then it has, these kind of notions about beyond just like the character stuff and the great performances and kind of it's pretty straightforward, honestly, just done beautifully, executed super well. And it does have like things like, just going back to kind of the subtext, which there isn't a ton, but there is something about kind of, like I said, bureaucracy, the nature of loyalty, the nature of having a boss, and that's kind of wrapped in this idea of this killer's code, the code of a samurai. And it's great, man. Like, honestly, one of my new favorites. This will be something at some point, maybe next Criterion sale. Maybe I'll pick up the Samurai, because I think it's something I would love to have on my shelf and revisit whenever I want and get more into it. Get more into the background of it. I've said this before. I don't often love doing these videos about movies that I've never seen before. Because there's only so much you can say. You can look up stuff and try to give people like kind of some background history and stuff, but if you don't have like a personal connection to these things, it's just kind of hard to vamp about, and it's not as fun, it's not as interesting, because I haven't dived deep enough into it. It is kind of a surface, just first tertiary experience, and that's no fault of the movie. I don't want to sell the movie short, especially because I don't. But when it comes to something like this, when you watch something like this, you're just like, man, I got to tell everybody I know about the Samurai. Samurai is a fucking cool ass movie. If you just like cool genre stuff, it transcends transcends what you think it would be. I think like I was intrigued just by the log line, just by like that brief description. I was like, oh, this sounds really interesting. There was a picture, this brief description, and I was totally into it. It seemed like really cool. And I randomly put it on, and I'm glad I did, because I almost didn't. I almost was just like, oh, no, I'm going to watch something stupid. Something like easy to digest. It was early in the morning. I was like, But I was hooked. As soon as like frame one, it just starts in this really stark kind of unique looking world, and you're just immediately intrigued by it. It immediately draws you in. It has this really great like kind of steel blue monochrome color, like I said. And it's very visually arresting, and you're immediately just drawn in. Like it feels like a mystery unfolding as you're watching, especially with the first like 15 minutes of the movie, because it doesn't give you context for anything. So you're just kind of along for the ride. You're just following this dude for, a day, for his afternoon, as he's setting up the kill. He's taking the contract. He's going where he gets his gun. He's going where he gets his car. He's setting up his alibi. There's all these different things that he sets up. You kind of just spend like a day in his life leading up until he executes on the contract, and then everything kind of just starts unfurling. I think it's not, if I would say this, it might put people off a little bit because of how deliberate it feels, how mannered it is. Like it does feel like kind of like stagey, like almost artificial in a sense. But I don't know. That's what I found so appealing about it, because we've seen a million hitman movies. I mean, how many movies about hitman? His one last job or something. We've seen a bunch of those, right? And this was just a kind of a unique take on it. And the fact that it comes all the way back from 1967 makes it even more unique, makes it even more interesting. Definitely makes me want to go check out some more Jean-Pierre Melville. He hasn't done a ton of stuff, honestly. He was not the most prolific director. But I'm definitely going to check out some more of his filmography. He actually made this movie called A Cop with the same guy. It was the last movie he did, Un Flic. A Cop. It's the same actor from this, and I love their work together. So I'll probably check that out at some point in the near future. Because he's a great like aestheticist, It's a little cold, it's a little distant. I could also, I guess, if I wanted to be critical, I could criticize the movie for feeling a little distant. Because it's so immediate, like it's from the character's direct POV, there isn't a lot there to kind of ground you in terms of characters. And I think in part of like the weird mannered performances also provide more distance. So you're it's hard to empathize or really invest yourself in it in that sense, on an emotional level. It's just kind of a cool movie. But that's, to me, like sometimes that's okay. That works. That's the purpose. I think it is about the form, this movie. I don't think he was trying to send, Melville is not trying to create some sort of really, really emotional experience. That's not what you're supposed to take away from it, It's kind of more about the broad metaphor of living by a code, like we talked about earlier in this video. So yeah, if you have HBO Max, Le Samurai is 100% worth your time. I think it's also on the Criterion channel, also part of the Criterion collection. So check it out there. I would. I'm glad I did. It's been a lot of fun lately, kind of just going and watching like random movies. It doesn't always work out, And now I'm far enough ahead of my videos, I don't have to do a video about everything I watch. So I was like, oh, cool. Like sometimes I've watched some real stinkers and I'm just like, I got nothing, or not even stinkers, just like mediocre movies. I might do just like one big video about all the mediocre movies I watched since being sick. But you're just like, I'm like, I don't know if I can, like, I can't get more than a couple minutes out of this, I sometimes, there's even a few videos I've done in the past few months where it's like, I don't really got much to say. And I'm trying to get it to at least like 9 or 10 minutes just as an exercise. So that's a little some behind the scenes stuff for you. I watched Delta Force though. I talked about Delta Force for I think like 15 or 17 minutes, and I did not think I was going to be able to, but once I started going, I had some things to say, I guess. So sometimes even when I don't think I have a lot to say about a movie, I'll sit there and I'll just end up like actually logicking my way through a 20-minute conversation with myself. You know? Yeah. Anyways, this is not what that's about. This is about The Samurai. Great movie. Should definitely watch it. You should check it out. Put it on the list, everybody. Put it on the list. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, you want to keep up to date with everything Zoobox Nation, there's a bunch of links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, for my personal Twitter. Also, if you'd like to make a recommendation for one of these daily videos, for something for the Zoobox Prime, something for Zoobox Goes to the Movies, the big show where we do deep dives on movies, we have more thorough conversations. I have somebody with me help me break stuff down and have a lot of fun. We recently, the most recent episode will be of David Cronenberg's Scanners, so go check that out. And you have a great one. You have the best one ever. Just the best. Don't get killed by a hitman who thinks he's a samurai.